Have you ever sat by your window, coffee in hand, and wondered how life has shifted now that you're living alone? It's funny, isn't it? We spend much of our younger years wishing for a bit of peace and quiet. And then, when it finally comes, it brings with it a whole new world of feelings, experiences, and surprises. Today, I want to talk with you heart to heart about something that touches so many of us as we grow older: the unexpected ways living alone shapes us. Because if you're like me, you've probably noticed that being on your own isn't just about missing someone, it's about discovering yourself all over again. Living alone in our golden years can be one of the most empowering experiences of our lives. It's a time filled with reflection, renewal, and yes, even excitement. It's not always easy, but it's a journey that can open up a deeper kind of happiness, the kind that's built on knowing yourself better than ever before. Today, we're going to walk through 10 ways living alone changes us, often in beautiful, meaningful ways. And I hope as you listen, you'll recognize some of your own experiences too, or feel inspired to embrace them even more. So, let's sit back, take a deep breath, and start with the first wonderful thing living alone helps us do: reconnecting with ourselves. When life is bustling, full of family, work, and the constant noise of daily demands, it's easy to lose little pieces of who we are. But when the house becomes quiet, something amazing happens. We finally have the space to listen to our own hearts again. I think of June, a 66-year-old woman from Oregon, who shared her story with me once. After her husband passed away, June moved into a small cottage just outside of town. At first, the silence felt almost unbearable. She would turn the TV on just for background noise, anything to fill the space. But little by little, June realized the quiet wasn't her enemy. It was her invitation. An invitation to rediscover the things she loved: reading poetry by the fireplace, tending to a little herb garden on her porch, painting watercolors late into the evening just because it brought her joy. Living alone taught June, and so many like her, that solitude isn't about being lonely. It's about remembering what stirs your soul. It's about finding peace, not in the absence of others, but in the presence of yourself. And once we start reconnecting with who we are, something else naturally follows. We begin creating new routines and rituals that nourish us every single day. When you live alone, there's no one else's schedule to fit into. No rush to get breakfast on the table by a certain hour. No need to arrange your evening around anyone else's plans. You get to craft your days in a way that feels good to you. I think of Peter, a retired architect now living in Vermont. After decades of waking up at 5 in the morning, rushing through cold coffee and hurried goodbyes, Peter decided it was time for a change. Now he starts his mornings slow and sweet. He brews a fresh pot of coffee, the good kind, and sits by his window to watch the sun climb over the trees. Sometimes he reads the newspaper, sometimes he just listens to the birds. But every morning, that moment is his. In the afternoons, Peter takes a leisurely walk down the quiet country roads near his home. It's not just exercise, it's a daily ritual that gives rhythm and meaning to his days. And in the evenings, he lights a candle and writes in a little journal, jotting down anything that made him smile that day. That's the gift of living alone, the ability to design a life that fits like a soft, warm sweater, comfortable, familiar, and entirely your own. And as we move deeper into this journey, we realize something else. Living alone teaches us to be self-reliant in ways we might never have imagined. There's no one else to call when the kitchen sink clogs or the smoke detector starts chirping at 2 in the morning. It's just you and the problem. But far from being scary, this can be a source of real pride and confidence. I remember talking to Walter, a 69-year-old gentleman from North Carolina. His wife had always been the one to handle the household chores, the bills, the maintenance, all the little things that keep a home running. After she passed, Walter found himself staring at the washing machine as if it were a spaceship. He didn't know where to start. But instead of giving up, he took a deep breath and decided to learn. A few YouTube tutorials here, a few mistakes there, and slowly but surely, Walter became his own handyman, cook, and bookkeeper. The first meal he made, a simple pot of spaghetti, wasn't anything fancy, but it was his. He sat down at the table, said a little prayer of thanks, and ate every last bite with a grin on his face. Walter told me that learning to take care of himself gave him a kind of strength he hadn't felt in years. He realized he was capable, not just of surviving, but of thriving. And let me tell you, that kind of confidence has a way of lighting up every corner of your life. Living alone doesn't mean facing the world empty-handed. It means realizing that everything you need is already within you, just waiting to be discovered. Now that we've talked about reconnecting with ourselves, building new routines, and becoming more self-reliant, let's continue exploring the surprising and wonderful ways living alone can enrich our lives. As we move forward on this journey of living alone, another beautiful transformation unfolds. We find ourselves rediscovering old hobbies and exploring brand new interests, sometimes ones we never imagined we would enjoy. I think of Marjorie, a 74-year-old woman from Colorado. When she was raising her family and working full-time, there was simply no space in her life for her old love of painting. The brushes got packed away, the canvases collected dust in the attic. But after she settled into her new rhythm of living alone, she felt a tug at her heart, a quiet whisper reminding her of the joy she once found in colors and shapes. One day, Marjorie dusted off her old supplies and began painting again. At first she was rusty, uncertain, but slowly something incredible happened. That small hobby blossomed into a passion. Her home is now filled with vibrant, joyful paintings, reminders of her creativity, her spirit, her resilience. She even started attending local art classes, becoming friends with others who shared her love for creating beauty. Then there's Ben, a 73-year-old from a small town in Maine. After his wife passed away, the quiet moments became heavy for him. One afternoon, while sitting in his backyard, he noticed a tiny red cardinal perched on a tree branch. It was such a simple moment, but it sparked something in him. He started bird-watching, first casually, then with more and more excitement. He bought a small journal and binoculars, began learning the names of all the birds that visited his garden. Ben shared that bird-watching helped him heal, helping him see that even on the loneliest days, life was still moving, still singing, still beautiful. Living alone gives us the incredible freedom to rediscover the things we once loved and to fall in love with entirely new passions that fill our hearts and our days. And as we fill our own cups with joy and creativity, something else starts to happen. We build stronger, more meaningful connections with others, but this time entirely on our own terms. When the noise of daily obligations falls away, we finally have the clarity to see who truly matters in our lives. The invitations we accept, the conversations we engage in, the friendships we nurture, they all come from a genuine place. Take Sharon, a 67-year-old grandmother from Texas. After years of bustling family life, she found herself living alone for the first time. At first, she feared the quiet might feel like loss. But what she discovered instead was an opportunity. With no one else demanding her time, she began reaching out intentionally, calling her daughters for long, meaningful conversations, meeting a neighbor for coffee once a week, even joining a local book club. Sharon said she never felt so connected because, for the first time, every interaction was filled with purpose and love, not obligation. And then there's Harold, a retired school principal from Wisconsin. Always a bit of an introvert, Harold found that living alone allowed him to open up in ways he hadn't before. He joined a chess group at the local library, where he met a few like-minded souls who quickly became dear friends. Harold once said, "I may live alone, but my life is more full than ever." It's a powerful reminder that solitude doesn't have to mean isolation. It can actually deepen the way we connect with others, and most importantly, with ourselves. Of course, even with these beautiful transformations, there are still days when loneliness creeps in. That's simply part of being human. Living alone naturally brings moments when the silence feels a little too loud, when the nights stretch a little too long. But here's the wonderful truth. Over time, we learn that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. I think about Margaret, a 71-year-old widow from New Hampshire. She shared with me once how devastating the silence felt after her husband passed. But instead of fighting it, she began leaning into the quiet moments. Every evening, she would sit by her window with a cup of chamomile tea and watch the sun set over the hills. At first, it was painful, a reminder of what she had lost. But slowly, those sunsets became a kind of meditation, a daily ritual of gratitude and reflection. Margaret said she still has lonely days, of course. We all do. But she no longer fears the silence. She welcomes it because within the quiet, she has found her own strength, her own peace. Living alone teaches us that solitude can be one of the most comforting companions if we let it. It becomes a sacred space where healing happens, where wisdom grows, where we reconnect with the simple, breathtaking beauty of being alive. And as we embrace that solitude, something truly special happens. We begin creating a home that reflects who we are, not just who we once were. When you live alone, every room, every corner becomes a reflection of your spirit. There's no compromising on color choices, no need to check with anyone before rearranging the furniture or hanging a new painting. You get to create a space that feels like a hug from your soul every time you walk through the door. I think of Leonard, a 62-year-old musician from Arizona. After his divorce, Leonard moved into a small, sunlit apartment. At first, he kept the walls bare and the space sparse, feeling uncertain about what home even meant anymore. But then one day, he picked up his guitar, played a few soft notes, and realized this was his space now, his sanctuary. Slowly, Leonard filled his apartment with what made his heart sing: vintage record albums, cozy throw blankets, a small but thriving collection of houseplants. He painted one wall deep blue, simply because it reminded him of the ocean. Now, his home feels like a song, rich, vibrant, entirely his. Or consider Teresa, a retired nurse from Michigan who always dreamed of living in a house filled with bright, cheerful colors. Her husband had preferred neutral tones, and for decades she went along with it. But when she found herself living alone, Teresa let her true colors shine. She painted her kitchen a sunny yellow, added teal cushions to her chairs, and hung colorful quilts on the walls. Teresa told me that for the first time in years, she felt like she was living inside a place that mirrored her spirit, joyful, warm, alive. Living alone gives us the rare and wonderful chance to shape our world exactly the way we want it. A world that wraps us in comfort and reminds us every day, this is your life, and it's beautiful. Now that we've seen how living alone helps us rediscover passions, forge deeper connections, embrace solitude, and create homes that reflect our truest selves, let's continue walking this journey together. As we continue along this beautiful journey, another gentle shift happens. Living alone brings a quieter life, and within that quiet, many of us find ourselves practicing mindfulness and gratitude almost without even realizing it. Simple tasks, the ones we might have once rushed through without a second thought, become little acts of presence and joy. I think of Ruth, a 78-year-old woman living in a cozy cottage in Northern California. After her husband passed, Ruth moved closer to her daughter, but chose a small home of her own. She said that when she first started living alone, the silence made her nervous. But over time, she found herself slowing down, breathing more deeply, noticing things she had missed before. She told me that something as simple as watering her garden turned into a form of meditation. Watching the water soak into the earth, feeling the coolness of the soil in her hands, she felt connected, not just to her garden, but to life itself. And then there's Leonard, a retired librarian from Ohio. he began keeping a small gratitude journal, writing down 3 things each evening that had brought him even the smallest bit of joy. Sometimes it was a call from an old friend, sometimes just the way the sun fell across his front porch. Leonard said that writing those little moments down shifted something deep inside him. Instead of focusing on what he missed, he started noticing what he had. And slowly, day by day, his heart felt lighter, steadier, more open to the beauty all around him. Living alone often slows life's pace just enough for us to savor the sweetness that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. The warm smell of coffee in the morning, the first bird songs of spring, the gentle rustling of the trees outside your window. These small acts of mindfulness and gratitude turn each day into a gift, no matter how ordinary it may seem. And as we become more present, more aware of our blessings, we also find ourselves taking charge of our health and well-being in new, empowering ways. Living alone teaches us something very important. There's no one else to make that doctor's appointment for us, no one else reminding us to take our vitamins, no one urging us to get a little exercise. We realize, sometimes for the first time in years, that our health truly rests in our own hands. Take Roger, a 69-year-old former mail carrier from Idaho. After decades of working physically demanding jobs, Roger thought retirement would be a time to rest. But once he started living alone, he realized how easy it was to slip into unhealthy habits. Too much television, too little movement. So he made a decision. Every morning, rain or shine, Roger laces up his sneakers and walks around his neighborhood. At first, it was just a few blocks. But now, 2 years later, he's part of a local walking group. He's stronger, he sleeps better, and he's made wonderful friends along the way. And then there's Marlene, a vibrant, 72-year-old woman from Savannah, Georgia. After living her life taking care of everyone else, her children, her husband, her elderly parents, Marlene finally decided it was time to take care of herself. She began seeing a therapist, something she had always put off. She started meditating, even if it was just 5 quiet minutes before bed. And she allowed herself the grace to prioritize her emotional health, recognizing that her well-being mattered just as much as anyone else's. Marlene says she feels lighter, freer, more herself than she has in decades. And it all began when she realized that living alone wasn't a burden. It was an opportunity to choose herself every single day. And finally, one of the most delightful surprises about living alone is how it transforms something as simple as cooking into a celebration of creativity and self-care. When you're not cooking for a family anymore, the kitchen becomes a playground. There's no need to worry about who likes what, no negotiations over what's for dinner. It's just you, your tastes, your cravings, your joy. Think about Elaine, a 65-year-old woman from Vermont. After her husband's passing, she realized she had spent most of her life cooking meals that others wanted. Meatloaf because it was his favorite, spaghetti because the kids liked it. But now, living alone, Elaine decided to cook for herself, and herself alone. She started experimenting with recipes she had always wanted to try: Thai curries, fresh Mediterranean salads, homemade sourdough bread. Some meals were hits, some were hilarious flops, but every dish was a reminder that she was free to follow her own tastes and desires. Or consider Samuel, a widower living in Oregon. Samuel discovered that he preferred simplicity. Instead of fussing over complicated meals, he developed a weekly menu of easy, nourishing dishes that kept him healthy and made his evenings relaxing instead of stressful. Samuel told me that even something as simple as preparing a hearty vegetable soup made him feel connected to life. He said, "Cooking for myself is an act of love. It's my way of saying, you matter." And that's truly what living alone teaches us, isn't it? That we matter. Our needs, our joys, our dreams, they're not secondary. They are vital, they are beautiful, and they are worth celebrating every single day. Living alone in our later years isn't about giving up or settling or shrinking into the background. It's about stepping into a life that is deeply ours, messy, beautiful, soulful, vibrant. It's about taking the quiet moments and filling them with laughter, creativity, healing, and love. It's about honoring the journey that brought us here and embracing the new adventures that still await. So if you find yourself living alone, I hope you'll remember, this isn't the end of your story. It's a brand new chapter, and you are the author now. You can fill these pages however you choose, with color, with music, with growth, with connection. And most of all, I hope you know that you are never truly alone. Because every sunrise you greet, every new hobby you try, every moment you savor is a beautiful reminder that life still has so much joy left to offer. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If you felt a spark of hope, a moment of recognition, or simply a bit of warmth, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters too, and it just might inspire someone else who needs to hear it. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more uplifting conversations just like this one. Here's to living fully, beautifully, and bravely, at every age. You deserve nothing less.